sexual intercourse of the gods was what made the world fertile, filled it with sexual energy, which of course affected the way men and women looked at each other throughout the ancient world, even in ancient Israel. The belief that human sexuality mirrors divine behaviour, it's what the gods do, it's how they keep the world alive, makes it impossible for sex to be immoral or shameful.
All night long on my bed I longed for my beloved. I longed for him, but he never appeared.
This is the Bible, the Song of Songs. It belongs to a literary tradition that dates back 5,000 years.
I will arise and look all around throughout the town and throughout the streets and squares.
And it's still sung by Orthodox Jews on a Friday night. The Song of Songs seems a pretty surprising thing to find in the Bible. It puts the joy of sexual love at the very heart of Judaism, just the same as the old pagan religions.
These love poems go back in ancient Egypt and Mesopotamia to a much earlier period, perhaps 2,000 or 3,000 years earlier. Originally, these were songs told about the love affairs of the gods. And then people, imitating the gods, of course, began to celebrate their own love in the same way.
But how could the God of the Old Testament have a love affair if there was only one God?
The official version of Israelite religion in the Hebrew Bible is that there was only one God, and that this God was male. But there are shadowy representations of a female deity who was, first of all, condemned and gradually forgotten. Her name was probably Asherah. She was the great mother goddess of Canaan before Israelite times, and she was borrowed into Israelite religion.
Well, this is Mrs. God.
This is Mrs. God?
Yes, this is one form of Mrs. God. In a figurine form. We can see that her main attribute is her life-giving breast milk and life-giving force.
So the early Israelites worshipped a fertility cult, and their religion celebrated sex, the sexual act.
Yes, very much so.
So what happened to the divine couple? Why did Mrs. God get written out of the story?
Well, Mrs. God didn't even get divorced. She sort of got forcibly removed and denied existence.
The Bible itself records the destruction of Asherah in Jerusalem around 650 BC. This happened at a time when the whole of the Near East had been taken over by the Assyrian Empire. Jerusalem was holding out alone against impossible odds. And the temple priests decided that any gods with foreign connections had to be thrown out. So, Mrs. God, Asherah, an imported goddess from Canaan, bit the dust. Most scholars think that it's around this time that the Book of Genesis was written, and that put woman firmly in her place. The emphasis was no longer on woman as life-bringer, but as man's downfall, bringer of trouble and death. And it introduced something else as well, shame of the body. The two of them were naked, Adam and the woman, and they were not ashamed, until they ate the fruit that gave them understanding of good and evil, and then they knew that nakedness was wrong, and they were ashamed. We don't know exactly when Eve was invented, but she belongs to a new age of warfare, the Iron Age. War itself had changed as iron weapons had appeared. Rulers were now less concerned with guaranteeing fertility than with military supremacy. Men had taken over and filled their universe with gods and heroes, and the same thing was happening in Greece. Everything was about masculine power. Even in the practice of sex, it was still a man's world. This is Thebes, the city of Oedipus. In ancient times, it was guarded by a crack fighting force, the Sacred Band of Thebes. The Sacred Band was remarkable because they were trained never to surrender, but to fight until the death. Another remarkable thing about the Sacred Band of Thebes was that they were all homosexuals. In fact, you couldn't join the band unless you were one, and you brought your lover with you. But the Sacred Band was not invincible. In 338 BC, they were overcome by the superior forces of Philip of Macedon and his son, Alexander the Great. The band fought as they'd been trained, to the death, and Philip was so moved by their bravery that he wept over their dead bodies and built this monument in their memory. It's a monument to love between men and valor. The Greek philosopher Plutarch wrote, "The lovers and the beloved, ashamed to be cowardly in each other's eyes, willingly rush into danger to protect one another.